last video, we examined how classical conditioning takes place, and you should recall that conditioning requires that the CS occur before the US. And also, it needs to occur very close in time and needs to be a consistent predictor. The two of them need to reliably go together, and this is true most of the time. There are some situations, however, where learning occurs after just one pairing. And the neutral stimulus might actually occur several hours before the US, and yet learning still develops. Let me give you the most common example of taste aversion. Let's imagine that Gianna goes out to a party, and she is wearing a new outfit, hanging out with friends she just recently met. She's listening to some music that she really hasn't heard of before, and she's drinking a drink that she's never drank before, cranberry and vodka in this case. All of these are starting off as neutral stimuli. She has very limited experience with them, and none of them has been paired with excessive alcohol before. The excessive alcohol in this case would be the unconditioned stimulus, because no matter who you are, you do not have to learn to vomit in the case of having excessive alcohol. There's a little martini glasses in the bloodstream, by the way. All right, let's focus over here on the neutral stimuli then. Of these stimuli, which is the most likely to develop into a conditioned stimulus? Remember, she's had just one pairing of each of these, and that shouldn't be enough for learning to occur, and yet it will. She will learn, whether she likes it or not, a conditioned response of nausea to one of these, the cranberry juice. But why? Why are we more likely to learn that cranberry predicted excessive alcohol and then therefore creates a conditioned response of nausea? Why do we learn that and not an association with any of those other items? This is biological preparedness. We are biologically prepared to learn certain associations much more quickly than others if they A, promote survival, and B, involve the same system. Taste and vomiting both involve the digestive system, right? So they go together. So now Gianna feels nauseous whenever she sees or experiences cranberry juice. This is because that conditioned response of nausea is preparing her body. It causes her to avoid that cranberry juice, and that hopefully should enhance her survival, or at least her general well-being. So how can Gianna overcome this so that she can once again enjoy cranberry juice? Well, her first instinct is to avoid it because it makes her nauseous. But the thing with conditioning is that we don't simply forget an association. It lingers in our cerebellum and our cortex, and it's very unlikely to go away. What she needs to do is to experience new learning. She needs to experience extinction. There needs to be a number of cases where she experiences the juice and it reliably predicts nothing. This is simple, but it may not always be easy. Gianna has to force herself to encounter cranberry juice and not pair it with alcohol. Now, if the association is negative like it is here, she might need to start with a fairly mild encounter with cranberry juice, perhaps just looking at a jug of it. After a few times of looking at this jug and having it predict absolutely nothing, she will no longer get nauseous, and maybe she can move towards smelling the drink. Again, pair it with nothing, and it becomes safe again. And she can get to more and more intense versions until eventually she's able to drink the cranberry juice without feeling nauseous. By the way, the same process is used to help people get over phobia. We'll explore it again when we cover the psychological disorders and therapy section. And in short, a person experiences a mild form of their phobic object. Maybe it's a spider. And they gradually allow themselves to encounter more anxiety-provoking versions. They might start with viewing a picture of a spider, and then encountering a silly toy, and then maybe a more realistic toy, until eventually they are able to actually move to something that would have been completely paralyzing with fear originally. Each time that they encounter something new, they relax and they learn that that spider predicts nothing, and that's extinction. It's worth noting, however, that again, extinction is not the same as forgetting. That original association between the spider and something terrifying is still lurking somewhere in our heads. Consequently, long after extinction has taken place and we're feeling good like this gal here, there may come a time when that CS shows up and the previously conditioned response of fear occurs. This is spontaneous. There was no US, but the original conditioned response shows up again. This is spontaneous recovery. Typically, the person will need to undergo the extinction process again, but it'll take less time than it did the first time. Now, speaking of phobia, I want to discuss the last two concepts, generalization and stimulus discrimination, by considering their role in phobia. Let's consider the famous and sad case of little Albert. This infant was exposed to various neutral, even pleasant stimuli, including a white rabbit, a white rat, as well as a mask with some hair that was made to look like Santa Claus. Then, and here's where the conditioning took place, each time Albert saw the rat, the experimenters would bang a loud metal bar behind his head. Please note, this hammer is not actually hitting Albert, even though it kind of looks like that. After several pairings like this, rat, bar sound, rat, loud noise, the rat had become a CS that predicted that loud, scary sound. Now this is where the generalization comes in. He wasn't just frightened of the rat, but the frightening nature of the rat generalized and was extended toward other objects that were similar. It was a furry rabbit and that Santa Claus mask. Both of those you can see were very frightening to little Albert because that fear had generalized. Now, similarly, if a person has a bad experience with a German Shepherd dog, they are likely to develop a phobia not just of that dog, but other similar looking dogs. That fear generalized. However, while that person may have a phobia of larger dogs with pointy ears, they might be okay with small dogs, particularly if they're of a different color or a different structure. And this is known as stimulus discrimination, and it's essentially the opposite of generalization. The person can differentiate or discriminate between the potentially dangerous object with the neutral or safe object. So to summarize, in this video we reviewed several key concepts of classical conditioning. First, biological preparedness, and then we went into extinction, spontaneous recovery, generalization, and stimulus discrimination. By the way, the people who did the little Albert experiment were dismissed from their positions at Johns Hopkins. Not for this experiment, but for having an affair with each other, because one was a professor and the other a graduate student. Historians believe little Albert died of hydrocephalus around the age of 6. It's not known if prior to that he had lost the fears he learned in this study. Thanks, folks.